If you're a Blackhawks fan and you've been watching my channel, you've seen some pretty disturbing stuff. You saw my DeBrincat video to New Jersey, which didn't turn out true, but then like 3 months later or something, he got dealt to Ottawa, made a video about that too. Now you're seeing a Jonathan Toews trade to Boston video, and here we are with a Patrick Kane trade to Toronto video. Do we see the Chicago duo going their separate ways to their new Original Six franchises? This has been the talk for over a year now, and the Blackhawks are expected to be the most watched and sought-after team come trade deadline day. All the hockey fans will be watching this team very closely to see what they do to two of the greatest NHL players of all time. We're talking about two guys who are first ballot Hall of Famers, whether you like it or not. Two guys with 3 Stanley Cups, Hart trophies, Selke trophies, Ted Lindsay trophies, everything. But the party ends here. The Chicago Blackhawks are officially beginning a rebuild which has gone off to the right start. They are at the bottom of the league. They're trying to win the lottery and get Connor Bedard to the Windy City. With two of the oldest and longest tenured and arguably their most talented players on the trade block, a lot of teams have called in for their availability, especially when it comes to Patrick Kane. And when it comes to Patrick Kane, ladies and gentlemen, expect the Toronto Maple Leafs to get involved. Typical of the Matthews-era Toronto Maple Leafs, they've stayed at the top of the division and honestly the league with their 31-13-8 record. As usual, they will be buyers come the trade deadline. We've seen in the past that Toronto loads up on the deadline day and gets big names to go on a deep playoff run. When you hear Patrick Kane's name on the trade block, there's definitely a reason why they should get involved. Let's go back to March of 2022 when Kyle Davidson announced that the Chicago Blackhawks were bound to rebuild rather than retool. Everyone's eyes immediately sat on what the future of Patrick Kane would be, especially what would happen to him in Chicago. He's no doubt their most valuable trade asset right now and has the potential to still be a great player at the age of 34. He literally notched 92 points last year as a 33-year-old, so there's no doubt he can still perform. But with the deadline being less than a month away, the chances of seeing Kane, who, by the way, is a pending unrestricted free agent, getting traded are increasing by the day. There's no question that every contending team in the NHL would want to get a guy like Patrick Kane, a guy who's a top-tier talent right before the playoffs begin. He's been arguably one of the greatest ever for the past 16 years and could very well be labeled the greatest American player of all time. I mean, the dude has literally won everything. He's won the Calder, the Art Ross, the Hart Trophy, the Ted Lindsay Trophy, the Conn Smythe Trophy, and of course, based on winning the Conn Smythe, he's won a Stanley Cup. But the funny thing is that he's won the Stanley Cup 3 times. Not to also mention how he's gone over 1,000 points in 1,000 games, which is pretty much why he's on the 2017 NHL 100 Greatest Players list. He and Toews are both on that list, actually, and both of them are future first ballot Hall of Famers. But the thing is, Patrick Kane is way more valuable than Jonathan Toews. He's a better producer, he's less injury prone, and younger by a year. The Toews to Bruins video I made was mostly proving how Toews is insurance for the Bruins Cup run. I genuinely think for Patrick Kane, he's going to be more of an impact player. People will say that Kane's a bit overrated, and you can kind of agree to that considering that he only has 31 points in 43 games and is falling below a point per game rate. But again, it's the Blackhawks who he's playing for. Without Kane or Toews, their best player is Max Domi. Think about that. Max Domi, a guy who was once a bottom 6 player like a year or two ago with Columbus, Montreal, Carolina, is now the best player on your team. He actually leads Chicago in points, which is the funniest part, so clearly Chicago is not in the right hands, but Toronto is. Imagine a line where you had Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, and Patrick Kane. How absolutely terrifying would that be? Kane has garnered a lot of interest across the NHL since he became available, so let's not be surprised that multiple teams are in on him. We heard that Toronto was one of the teams interested in Kane from an article in the 4th period. Let's get into the details. When we take a look at this Maple Leafs team, there's not that many weak spots. It's actually pretty easy to say considering that they're one of the best teams in the entire league. This is certainly one of the deepest rosters they've had within the last few years, and it's indicative of their excellent record to this point in their season. The same could be said about last year too, but it would not hurt for them to add a game changer to their group, and when I say a game changer, I'm not talking about some prototypical guy who is a 45 to 55 point top 6 winger. I'm talking about a former first overall pick, a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. And you know what? Forget it. It's Patrick Kane. That's all you need to know. They're getting Patrick Kane. He's going to be a threat to opposing defenses if he's on such a powerhouse team like Toronto. We're talking about a guy who's bound to become a massive upgrade over Cal Jarnkrok on that second line, could be bumped to the first line to play on that so-called Marner's Matthews-Kane line, could also make an all-first overall line with Matthews, Tavares, and Kane, but I really doubt that happens. Toronto needs to maximize depth in their game. Maybe something like Kane, Tavares, and Nylander could be the case, and that would absolutely be deadly for them. That could certainly get them ahead of their rivals in the Eastern Conference, which of course is very competitive. Plus, imagine seeing Kane on the power play. According to StatMuse, the Toronto Maple Leafs have the 7th best power play in the NHL, which is very good. Any team within the top 10 has an excellent power play, and we can maybe expect that 25% conversion rate on the power play to increase. Kane, being one of the best playmakers of all time, can certainly give a boost to the Toronto power play. But really, the biggest reason why Kane should head to the 6, and unfortunately this will make a lot of Leafs fans upset, is because he has proven to be a big-time winner, while the Leafs, on the other hand, really haven't, if I'm being honest. Since the time Austin Matthews came into the league back in 2016, the Leafs have made the playoffs every year, but have found a new way to lose in the very first round every time. Make matters any way worse, the Leafs have not won a series since 2004, as they go from an intimidating cup-caliber team to a memeable disaster come April or May. But as I've mentioned this before, Kane has had ultimate success in Chicago. He was a huge part of the Blackhawks 2010 dynasty, winning 3 Stanley Cups in the process. If anyone knows about winning, it's got to be Patrick Kane. So now let's talk about a potential return for the Blackhawks if the Maple Leafs do indeed land Patrick Kane. We all know that whatever comes Chicago's way will be a very big return. There's no doubt on that. He's still a star player, and similar to Jonathan Toews, he's an integral part of this franchise. Arguably the most talented Blackhawk we've ever seen. Second all-time in points behind Stan Mikita. When we discussed the trade between Toronto and Vancouver, including Bo Horvat, we mentioned how the Leafs would certainly not want to give up their best prospect in Matthew Knies, but since this is for a much better player and a much more valuable player overall, we should say goodbye to Knies because he would be that prospect heading to Chicago. We should also see Hawks GM Kyle Davidson request a 2023 first-round pick along with Knies as a starting point because yes, there could be much more than this. The Leafs have limited cap space, meaning that they're actually better off giving more assets to the Blackhawks. I think that every Leafs fan can agree that the guy who would be getting traded in a situation like this would be Alex Kerfoot. He struggled a bit, and he's just kind of that guy who the Leafs can, live without, if that makes any sense. But all of this would happen provided that Patrick Kane's salary is fully retained. We could also see a third team getting involved and maybe take a portion of Kane's salary if they land something as a return. Knies is the perfect prospect that a rebuilding team like Chicago needs. He's big with a 6'3" stature and has all the right tools to become an effective power forward at an NHL caliber, and this is important because we're not seeing many enforcers in the league anymore and grinders are becoming rare. Power forwards are the guys you see fighting more often and throwing those big hits, which makes Knies super important. He could also have some scoring prowess as he put up 33 points in 33 games with the University of Minnesota last year, so having a point per game rate is one thing and staying consistent is another. He put up 30 points in 28 games this year so far, so he's kind of maintained that point per game rate. Now talking about Alex Kerfoot, he's most likely not going to be a part of the Blackhawks' future plans as he's a lot older than the other guys we've talked about. He's 28 years old and could become trade bait for other teams before the deadline hits. He's a pending unrestricted free agent who has recorded 23 points in 52 games. But hey, in the end, this is all hypothetical. The only way to really ignite this trade is by having Kaner waive his full NMC. Without it, the Blackhawks legally cannot trade him as it would violate several rules. But considering how Kane is about to miss the playoffs for the 6th straight year, let's not count the bubble for now, he may want to chase glory for a 4th time and maybe do it with Austin Matthews and company. I mean, having an American duo in him and Matthews and having a Canadian duo in Marner and Tavares, if you mesh those together, well, this could really be it for Toronto. And I'm sure the guys there want Kane to stay past this season if all goes well. It's good for Chicago too, since they land a ton of assets which will benefit their future, so it could be a win-win trade in the end. So let me know what you guys thought about this trade. Does the trade happen? If so, who wins? Does Toronto go on their chase for a cup with Showtime? Do the Blackhawks build their future in the right direction? Let me know. Otherwise, thank you guys for tuning in and have a wonderful day.